welcome to this week's episode of Krime KE podcast. My good name is Ajuma, and I'm a human rights journalist from Kenya. This week, we get into the story of the disappearance of George Macharia Mburu in Mogadishu, Somalia, in 2014. Now, I want to preface this episode by saying that much of this story has been told from the perspective of Wanjiku Mburu, who is George's sister and who has been a very consistent advocate for his return to Kenya. Now, this is the story of a family's desperate attempt to bring back their loved one in a fight that has lasted for more than a decade. George Macharia Mburu and George Macharia Njoki left Kenya for Somalia on 5th January 2014 after landing a job contract. Now, apart from being first cousins and sharing names, the two also worked together as engineers installing, maintaining, and constructing petrol stations. And that was the same job that they were traveling to Mogadishu to do that January. They had gotten a contract to work as engineers for the East African Construction Company. Now, according to Wanjiku Mburu, the family was excited about the opportunity for the two cousins because they had been offered good money, and the family wasn't even worried about them traveling to Somalia because it was not their first time to go there for the same job. Now, Wanjiku say that on the day that they left for Somalia, she was shooting for Machachari, the show where she played Mama Baha, so she was not able to take them to the airport. That was their norm. Now, she spoke to her brother and they agreed that he would call her and inform her when they landed in Mogadishu, which he did. He called her when they landed and she wished him a good time in Somalia, and they both went about their business after that. Now, the two cousins were supposed to return to Kenya on the 15th of January. So that means that they were supposed to be in Somalia for around 10 days. But on the 13th of January, their family got a call that would change their lives forever, and this would be the beginning of what I can only describe as a nightmare. Now, according to Wanjiku, she was out with friends that Monday when she got a call from her uncle at around 7 p.m. Her uncle informed her that he had found articles on the internet from Somali media, and the articles were reporting that two Kenyan engineers had been kidnapped by local militia in Mogadishu. Now, apparently the kidnappers had passed that information to the media houses for reporting. Now, Wanjiku say that this information, first of all, just disoriented her because none of them had seen this coming. And second, she was extremely worried about her brother because George Mburu is diabetic, so she knew that their abduction might cause him to get some health complications. From there, the family began a very long attempt at bringing the two cousins home. And when I say long, I mean long because as of the recording of this episode, it has been more than 12 years since they went to Somalia and they never returned to Kenya. A work trip that was supposed to last for 10 days has now turned into 12 plus years of questions, meetings, and relentless efforts to bring them home. Now, after the report that they had been abducted, the family say that they went to the Somali embassy in Kenya first for help. At the embassy, Wanjiku say that they did not get much help, and the reason the embassy said they couldn't help them was because their employer, who had brought them to work in Mogadishu, was a Kenyan citizen. He had dual citizenship for both Kenya and Somalia, but most of his business interests were in Kenya. So the embassy said that this was a Kenyan issue and they could not help them. So they were told to find the relevant Kenyan authorities to help them. Now, the strange thing is, despite the embassy saying that they couldn't help them, they were told two things by the same embassy. One, they were told that the government doesn't negotiate with terrorists, which sounds to me like, excuse my French, sounds to me like some bullshit from an American movie. And I think we all know that governments negotiate with terrorists all the time for the sake of their citizens. Take, for example, an attack like the one that happened at Westgate in 2013. Terrorists lock up people in a mall and essentially like take them hostage. The government will not sit back and say, so as a government, we do not negotiate with terrorists. So mjipange. Do you see how, how that does not make sense, right? They may not negotiate with the terrorists, but they will at least find a way to rescue their citizens. Do you get what I'm saying? Number two, the family was told that they needed to keep quiet about the abduction, which again doesn't make sense because if you can't help me, why are you telling me to keep quiet? Now, according to Anjiku, the embassy got in touch with the employer, who remains unnamed throughout, by the way, and the employer told the family that he would do everything in his power to bring George and his cousin home. But that was the last word the family ever got from this employer. So the family did as they were told. They tried to follow the chain of command silently as they were told by the embassy. Wanjiko says that they went to different ministry offices in the country, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Internal Security, but nothing substantial came out of it. She said that it felt like torture because they were always in meetings and appointments in different government offices, but nothing was being done to bring her cousins back home. And remember, they had also been told to keep quiet about it. So at some point, she said that she couldn't even speak on the phone because she was scared that they were being monitored. So, apart from their worry about their cousin's safety in Mogadishu, you can imagine the emotional toll that all this was taking on their family. Now, the days turned into weeks, turned into months, turned into years, with very little progress in locating George and his cousin in Somalia. According to Anjiku, they would make appointments with government officials, and by the end of one meeting, they had been given a different date for a different meeting with another government official, and that went on for a while without movement in their situation. Now, about 4 months after the abduction, George reached out to his family, and that was the first contact that they had after he was abducted. Wanjiko said that George called their father's phone and he told them that he was being held captive in Mogadishu. He told them that he had been allowed to call his family after he stabbed himself several times for around 7 days. He used the fact that he was diabetic and the abductors did not want to have him as a medical emergency as leverage to be allowed to contact his family back in Kenya. On the call, he told the family that he was abducted together with his cousin and they were held together. He didn't know who their abductors were or what they wanted from them. Now, the family learned that a local militia group had abducted them and they were demanding a ransom of 100 million US dollars from the employer who brought them to Mogadishu. And that is when they also found out that their abduction came about because of a business rivalry between two business partners. That is their employer, the dual citizen, and an unnamed partner. Now, remember, this was their second time going to Mogadishu for work. The first time they had gone to work in Mogadishu, they went to work for the unnamed business partner. I guess he didn't like it when they came back to work for his competitor or business rival, so he allegedly got a militia group to abduct them and demand ransom from their employer. Now, according to Anjiko, their family never directly communicated with the abductors. They would always make their demands to the employer, who would communicate with the embassy, and the embassy would pass the information to the family. Now, one thing that struck Wanjiko as odd during the many appointments and meetings that they had with the embassy or even the ministries, one thing that struck her as odd was that whenever they mentioned this employer's name, the dual citizen, everything would slow down. It appeared to them like he was quote unquote untouchable and somehow powerful enough to slow down investigations and efforts to recover the two cousins. After 6 years of worrying, staying quiet, and following the quote unquote right channels, Wanjiku came out in December 2019 and posted a 15-minute video across her social media platforms. This video was explaining her family's situation and their frustration with the government's silence. Now, in the video, Wanjiku also reads a letter that she wrote in August of 2017 to the president at the time, Uhuru Kenyatta, basically asking him to do something since the embassy and the ministries had not helped. Now, the letter reads like this: Dear Mr. President, I am writing to you, and this is me clutching at straws. I was told not to write to you. Others said I should follow the chain of command, which I did. And after a few attempts to seek an audience with the relevant people, we had our first meeting, and everyone was happy to see us. Well, that's until we told them why we were really there. And no sooner did they hear us than there were promises of immediate action. There was, call me first thing in the morning, which I did, and this was the narrative. In hushed tones, I was told, I'm in a meeting, I'll call you later. This went on for a while until they no longer bothered to pick up my calls. See, Mr. President, my brother was kidnapped, and it's now 3 years since, and nothing from you or your office. After everything has been said and done, it has been said and nothing done. So this is me hoping that with everything going on, your re-election, Githeriman rising to fame, you will get to read this and bring my brother home. 3 years, I think he has done his time. His children need their father, his wife a husband, his parents a son, and me, my brother. I remain in your service, Shiko. This was the letter that Wanjiku wrote to the president, hoping that he would read it and put at least the employer, put some pressure on the employer to work and bring her brother and her cousin back to Kenya. Now, Wanjiku said that after she posted the video, she posted the video after such a long time because the family had been silent about the kidnapping for 6 years. A lot of promises had been made by the government, but no actual movement has been made in the case. She said that the reason she chose to make the video and finally tell people about George's abduction was that she had been failed by the government and hoped that Kenyans would help her family push for George's return. She said that it was painful to watch her parents breaking down and the emotional toll that her brother's kidnapping was taking on the family. Now, George had left behind a wife and 3 children. The youngest was only 2 months old when he left for Somalia. In fact, Wanjiku says that every time she sees the boy growing, it is like a time-lapse reminder of how long her brother has been away. Now, Wanjiku and her brother George, whom she refers, by the way, to as Georgie, grew up being very close and supportive of each other. Now, in one interview, Wanjiku described how close they were with George and how much closer they even got after they lost their siblings. Now, in September 2020, she posted an Instagram post that she had gotten a tattoo on the back of her neck and on her left shoulder to honor George. She captioned the post, "For you, my brother, my blood brother. For you, I shed a tear, and for you, I will cross the ocean." She has personally been very vocal about her brother's kidnapping, and honestly, there is nothing she hasn't tried. In one interview, she even says that she tried to travel to Mogadishu to get his brother, despite being advised against it. That is how determined she was. She apparently went to Lamu, close to the Kenya-Somalia border, and while she was there, she gathered information on how to get to Mogadishu. She started going to mosques and I guess learning how to keep herself safe when she would eventually get to Somalia. But the whole plan was cut short after the COVID-19 pandemic hit in Kenya, and there were a lot of restrictions on movement, not only across the country, but also in the region. Also, she said that her mother was sick at the time, so she just had to go back home and take care of her. Now, unfortunately, their mother died of kidney failure in 2021, and she died still unaware of the whereabouts of her son in Mogadishu. Now, when I say Wanjiko has done everything, she has really tried. Wanjiko even once organized a walk on her birthday in 2020 on the 20th of January to raise awareness about George's disappearance and his abduction, and also to raise awareness about her family's plight and also to seek an audience with the president at the time. They walked to the office of the president at Harambee House and basically asked to speak to President Uhuru Kenyatta. They were told that the president had traveled and was not available to meet them when they got there. But they were also told to write a letter and leave it at the building, and the letter would eventually get to the president. They actually wrote a letter asking Uhuru to speak to her brother's employer and ask him to do something to bring him and his cousin home. They left it and hoped that the president would read it and do something about it. But again, they got no response or action. Wanjipo said that her family relied for the most part on people she calls sources for information on George's whereabouts. They were told that the two are still alive in the hands of the militia, but they are often moved around in Mogadishu. She said that some people would even try to use the family's situation to exploit them because they would tell them to pay them for information on the whereabouts of the cousins, which I think is just diabolical. Now, in an interview with Mpasho in February 2022, Wanjiko said that after she shared her story, a lot of people reached out to her to tell her that they were going through the same thing. They had relatives abducted in Somalia and even other countries like Congo, and they were also struggling to get them back. And this is the thing with suffering in silence. You see, this whole time they had been told to keep quiet. And if they had maybe spoken up earlier, they would know that they are not the only ones going through the problem. And maybe they would have had a community of people to talk to, even just compare notes and even just ask about the channels to follow under these circumstances. You see, the thing with being told keep quiet, you're scared, you can't ask anyone, it's sad. Wanjiko told Mpasho that she was working on a feature film inspired by her brother's story. She said that the movie was a creative outlet for her since she was a filmmaker and that is just her way of telling stories. The movie has never come out, by the way. Wanjiko said that there was a lot of fear, especially because her brother had not even been returned to Kenya yet. So we are hoping that the movie will come out sometime in the future. Now, the latest update in this case came in October 2024 when the family received another call from George in Somalia. Wanjiko said that George called them on Monday, 7th October 2024, and he sounded livelier and what she says she describes as sober-minded. George told them that he had been kept in solitary confinement for so long, he didn't even know what day or year it was, or even who the current president was. He said that his hands were cuffed and his legs chained most of the time, just looking at four walls, and he was confined to a very small space. Now, at the time of this call, George was not even in the hands of the militia who abducted him. He was now in the custody of the Al Shabaab. Wanjiko said that the militia had them in custody for a while, but when they saw that nothing was being done to pay the ransom or even just get them back to Kenya, they sold them off to the Al-Shabaab. Now, George said that he had never spoken to or seen his cousin, and he didn't even know where he was because he was sold to Al Shabaab, but he didn't know if his cousin was also sold or not. He said that he was jailed under the laws of the Al Shabaab, and his crime was being a Kenyan citizen. The Al Shabaab were demanding that for his release, the Kenyan government should speak to them about what nobody knows. Okay, they don't know, but probably the Al Shabaab knows. He said that the Al Shabaab regarded him as a prisoner of war, and the only way he would be released if the Kenyan government spoke to the Al Shabaab. Now the problem is that the government has refused to even acknowledge that he's in Somalia. George asked his family to try and push and put pressure on the government to claim him and talk to the Al Shabaab and even just use the taxes that he has paid as a citizen to secure his release. I mean, he has been there for more than a decade. I think he has served his time, if there was time to serve. When Wanjiko says that their family remains hopeful that they will be able to get George back, no matter how long it takes. Now, I would like to add my voice to that of George's family in asking for his release. Like Wanjiko says, everything has been said and nothing has been done, and I think that it is time for some action. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this episode. You can support Krime KE podcast by sharing this episode with your friends. On TikTok and Instagram, we are at krime.ke, crime with a K. On Facebook, you can find me at Ajuma Millicent. I have tagged the podcast contact information and social media pages in the show notes of this episode so that it is easier for you to reach out if you have any feedback on this episode or the podcast in general. We also have a WhatsApp number, which I have put in the show notes of this episode. You can send in voice notes, suggest cases, and give feedback. Don't forget to give the podcast a 5-star rating on Spotify and catch the next episode of Krime KE podcast on Thursday next week on the same platform that you're listening from right now. But until then, stay safe and remember, it is crime with a K.